Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets, joined once again by John Scott Perez, PhD. Wow, you're a billionaire. So, and you should be actually a billionaire with Allicin V. But I think you're moving in that direction. But we were talking a little bit before the show. You sent some videos about some maybe Trump health failing. We can talk about that. I think that's kind of like, they're trying to play the Biden trip on Trump. Who knows? But we'll look at that a little bit. We'll look at a Brazilian bat that has some kind of COVID or something, C19. Brazil, that's a very suspect place right now. But the one thing that's very interesting, is relevant to what's going on right now, is you have some connections with Citgo, which used to be very prominent here in the United States. I used to get gas there all the time because it was really cheap, but it's pretty much gone. You might see a Citgo station here and there, but once Hugo Chavez, seized all that, like we were talking about, it just kind of went away. So how you been?
Pretty good. I was doing some work today, and happy Halloween. I got mugged in my own house. I went looking for my Halloween mug for coffee, and I discovered it was gone with, some other ones. And anyway, my significant other wife, she mugged me. Anyway, I don't know what happened to it. I probably misplaced it, but Julie just brought me coffee, so I forgive her. I smashed her finger. Before this, we were doing the pool pump. It's Florida. We're having pretty good Florida weather, although it cooled down a little bit today. I know it's been very cold where you are. I've seen it snowing in Love Lake Tahoe area and all of that. It's beautiful. So
yeah, we've had some really good weather lately. So it's supposed to get nasty again, another week or so. But it's up and down.
I like that tank top, man. There's only one in the world.
Really?
Custom made. Born in the USA, baby.
That's cool. So you had to get it like super big. Fit me.
Sure, I made some items, and I've got one too.
Nice.
There's a store. There's an entire store you can buy these if you've had that experience with Allicin V, and there's all kind of garb there, and at the spring, and
nice.
hats and things like that. So when I got out of graduate school, I spent about 6 months analyzing water down in Sarasota for Davis Water, which is New York Stock Exchange. They build like waterworks and all the water plants around here, water systems, all kind of big water main like systems and water treatment plants. And they do that for manufacturing. I did that for about 6 months, heavy metals and biologicals. And it was crazy going back and forth from Sarasota. So I was looking for another job. And my dad did a lot of business with a company called Petroleum Packers. They became Amalie Motor Oil. The Barquette family owns them. And the Barquette family did packaging for Mobil, Citgo, everybody. I mean, Mobil One, Citgo, Exxon, Chevron, Pheno, all these people. And we're talking, a huge building with hundreds of tanks. And anyway, in the lab there, I came in and worked in the lab. There was a plaque on the wall where they had donated money to preserve 10,000 acres of the Amazon rainforest in Venezuela. And a lot of business was done with the Venezuelan family that owns Citgo. So the barges would come in with base stocks across the street on McKnight Pier. So this pier is a pier. I grew up working on the docks with my father. My father was U.S. Army, and then he went in the Marine business. So this is a pier that I had been going to since like age 7. And there are ammonia docks there, and you can't just go there anymore. but there are ammonia docks there, and the barges were there. And we would, when these barges came in, there was a trail, I swear, of oil all the way to Venezuela. And I think the only reason they were floating was because they were full of oil. But we would go on them, and one time we needed to go on the barges and get samples. We'd get samples. We'd run these plumb bobs down the bottom, get samples at the bottom in the middle of the tank, take them back to the lab and do all kind of analytics on them and make sure they were the right viscosity and the right product and everything was good, because sometimes these either the barges or the tankers would get water in them and it would damage them. And then we needed to know whether we needed to dry them and what tank we were going to put them in, if they needed to be dried and what was going on and the consistency of it. We would do that with every customer, not just this particular one. So one time my friend Chris, he's there and there's a wooden ladder and there's no gangway. So it's like 60 feet up and you're between this barge. Anyway, he puts down the wooden ladder and I held it and he went across. Now this thing, I was scared it was not going to be able to hold me. I was probably about 230 at the time, or maybe a little bit bigger. Anyway, I was scared it would break. And then I went across. But while this happened, there was a guy there in the plant who only had one eye, and he walked up and he goes, "That's how I lost my eye." And I was like, "Great. Did you really need to tell us that now?" So we went on the barge, and we went on mini barges, did the samples, and we used to get the Citgo base stocks from there to blend the oils, all kinds. So we did a lot of business with them, Citgo family. One time I had 1 million quarts of 1040 motor oil packaged in nice Citgo bottles, and it landed in Venezuela. And the bottles were all swelled up, and they opened it up, and it smelled really bad. And they interrogated me, and I was stressed out. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks because I thought they were going to hang me upside down in an oil tank and turn the steam on, which is how they dry the oil when it's wet. They run steam through it.
Wow.
I was pretty nervous about it. What it turned out that we had ISO like retention cages, very strict manufacturing. We had backups of everything. I'd written all the software. I wrote a lot of the software with Don Eggman and other people for them custom. And we retained everything and checked everything in the base stocks. It turned out the additive was bad. It was Lubrizol additive. There was a $35 million lawsuit. Lubrizol lost it. So it wasn't my fault or anything. It turns out all the things I did were good. During that time, I had the interview with the CIA, and they offered me more money. It was a lot less stress, a lot less exposure to
less of a chance to get steam cleaned.
Well, so I thought. There's a lot of South American stories here we can talk about. So I involving Brazil and all of this. So I was exposed to a lot of organic vapors. I worked in the lab there, did a lot of work, and that had both the work that I did in Sarasota and the work in that lab. What it did was it caused a bunch of cysts in my eye.
Wow.
From the volatile organic compounds and all these metals and acids. And so my neighbor, Jack Gugino, he's a famous eye doctor. He was a boxing commissioner here in the state of Florida. He and Chris Prado operated on my eye and took all these tear ducts out. And I was like, all these professors of mine that were exposed to all these chemicals, they started dying. So I was like, maybe I should just do the computer stuff. Maybe it's healthy for me. So I go and I get the job with the CIA interview. I didn't know it was a CIA at the time. And it was a black company called Digital Secured Networks. It was all about computer stuff. And that opened up a lot of doors for me. But what's ironic is that that was a lot of business that we did in Venezuela. And later on, when Hugo Chavez came into power, he nationalized Citgo. That was one of the companies he nationalized, and he took it.
That's
So,
interesting. I always thought it was Venezuelan, but it was American company, huh?
well, it's a Venezuelan family
Mm-hmm.
that owned it.
Okay.
He took it from them. But during that, there were Americans that worked for that company that he put in jail. And they were in jail for a long, long time. I think Marco Rubio actually helped get them out. They were in jail, and there were a lot of problems with Americans going down to South America and getting kidnapped in Caracas and these places. But fishing, so there, the fishing in that area and the Yucatan Peninsula and all of that, shrimping. But what happened after that was they didn't have a lot of experience in drilling and refining oil. So they struggled after that. And it was my understanding they struggled, from Venezuelans that I know. They struggled for a long time, and that Hugo Chavez actually realized that. And so Hugo Chavez had a relationship with Castro. And as a result of that, the Cubans came over and helped them for some time run their stuff, but it never really amounted to much. And
They didn't have the engineering background of the American companies, and they started to go downhill.
this is true. And so that went on for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, later on, the Russians and Chinese came into it at the same time. So I had already left there. I'd already gone and worked with CIA. So I worked with these Brazilian equivalent of the CIA. The first digital election was in 1996 in Brazil. And that election was encrypted by our encryption. And I was supposed to go down to Sao Paulo.
When you say our encryption, you mean the CIA's encryption, or?
Well, I was hired by this company, Digital Secured Networks.
CIA
I did
company.
not know that it was a black company.
Right. Cover company, yeah.
They watched me. They interviewed me in a hotel room. They watched me. They asked me some questions about hacking and wares. I didn't know they were watching me. Who was watching me in the next room? I didn't know that John Deutsch was in the next room with other people. I didn't know. So they asked me these questions. I told them how to hack up some Sierra Online software like Frogger and these video games that I've been hacking since I was a little kid. I started coding in 1980. I was about 12 years old. Visual Basic, GW Basic, Microsoft on the Atari 800 platform. I started coding. Then I wanted to be a video game coder. I was hacking. My friend Brian Turkell's father owned the Sony Consumer Center. So through Brian, we got the hacker tools. And a number of my other friends, we were cloning the cartridges onto floppy disks. And I was at the time dialing out with like a 100 baud modem. This was way before the internet. Going out to these places that were sharing software and teaching you how to hack software. So that's when all that hacking started. So I basically told Jack Caravan, who came from Digital Equipment Corporation, was instrumental in engineering the DEC Alpha chip, which ran the New York Stock Exchange at the time. I didn't know some of these things. You learn later. I told him how to hack Sierra Online software, and the phone rings, and apparently they were laughing and fell out of their chair in the room, so they hired me on the spot. And I went over and worked for those guys, and I was supposed to go to Sao Paulo. I didn't go because, one, I was scared because the police were on strike in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Okay, so Alvaro Lima, he was the guy from down there. I have the products on the wall, pictures. It was called the Heat Seeker Firewall, and basically it was the first distributed firewall. We had done all kind of competitive testing and things like that at the NSTL laboratory in Philadelphia, and this software, the way it would work is nodes would go on the computers, and then there'd be a centralized server, and it was monitoring all the networks from different positions. Well, Alvaro was the one that helped us, do the encrypt. We encrypted the voting. Okay. So now that was 1996.
So
But
is that how the Venezuelans got the voting? They're supposedly the
no, this
voting
is
hack is.
Brazil. Sao
So
Paulo,
you're doing Brazil. So
So
we know that Venezuela and Brazil are pretty much working together. The cartels.
I don't know, but okay. Yeah. So now questions arise. Number one, I know that, and I'm going to be very careful here and polite and not reveal things.
Okay.
Our people generically put this up. They knew the results of that election before the Brazilian government. Now, I don't know anything else other than the fact that we encrypted it. And, if I do, I'm not going to say anything. But that was the first digital election in the history of the world. So for me, being involved with that and understanding the level of encryption, because we basically had gone through the common criteria. Well, I mean, the Rainbow series, and then we wrote the common criteria for the NSA and NIST. We did that with this technology. This technology that we created ended up going into NATO while the NSA was watching encryption for SPOC, Security Proof of Concept Keystone, and a common criteria, which is a current standard. We encrypted the submarines at Norfolk wirelessly while they're doing fuel loads randomly. All of that. We had people working with us. A gentleman with a Navy clearance was Rob. We had people going to Norfolk. We had people going to bases. I work with CI and DEA, NSA, all of them, FBI, all of these people I was on the phone working with people that were there on site. They had different level of clearances and did different kind of things. So,
and you're all those agencies, and they're working with the Navy submarines, which is probably the most highly classified of all platforms out there. That's crazy. Wow.
So the Navy submarines, the whole thing with the submarines, and I've talked to some other people about this. Mm-hmm. They randomize their fueling. You'll never see a submarine running on full fuel because they're not going to be filling them up and running them on full fuel all the time, because the satellites can see the signatures of the submarine. So they randomize that in order to confuse the enemy and not give off signatures that might be detectable in space or in the water. And that's what they were doing. So they wanted to do that wirelessly. And we were the first ones to wirelessly encrypt that in Norfolk.
Unbelievable. Wow. You've been involved in so many different things. Now I know you're involved with hydrogen patents. What you have, like 5 now? Is that?
I have 5 U.S. patents with my partner, John Dottie. I'm 51% owner of 4 Electrons. So,
so where I was going with that was the submarines. I don't know how far you can go in that direction, but
we can talk about it.
All right. What do you got to say?
Right. That technology was originally born in 1954 with a Nautilus submarine, the first nuclear submarine that was capable of going underwater for 20 years. So they had a problem.
Wow.
They used to burn these iron oxide candles, and the problem there was they needed to go underwater for a longer period of time. So in the beginning, they used a GERO package to bring in the RO water, and then they brought in the RO water from the pressure outside of the submarine. That's what pushed the water in through this RO package. They then took the RO water and they brought it through what was a Giener LX, which became Treadwell Corporation, PIM. It was the early proton exchange membranes. And what they did there was they split the water, hydrogen oxide, into hydrogen and oxygen. And they used the oxygen for the sailors to breathe, and they could do this for long
Right.
periods of time. And each ship had a redundant pair of these in case one broke. They have 2 pairs with redundancy. The Navy has a lot of redundancy in what they do because marine situation is environmentals are hard on equipment. So I knew about that. I knew about
Yeah,
that.
and the SEAL teams, we say 2 is 1. So, yeah, there's always redundancy in everything, no doubt.
Sure. So I knew about that, but I learned a little bit more about that later with the Ohio class video that the military had released, that they were talking about these things with the Ohio class platform, because these things evolved. It's now Treadwell Corporation. Part of what they were doing back then was they had no use for the hydrogen at all. So what they were doing with the hydrogen was they were putting it in the bilge water and letting it out so that the vessel would not belch and give off its signature. And by doing that, they could circulate it in the bilge water and get rid of the hydrogen. And there are questions about whether they ever used hydrogen for heating at all, because there's nothing, no one knows anything about it. However, what we do know from the Ohio class video that has since been removed from the internet was that they use a little bit of hydrogen and oxygen with a little bit of that RO water, and they would detonate it underneath the Poseidon class missile 500 feet under the water. So that was stage 1. They detonate it, and the pressure from that detonation causes that missile to jump out of water like a fish.
Right.
Once it jumps out of the water like a fish, that fuel is now in the atmosphere with 20% oxygen, and they ignite stage 2, and it goes on its way to the target.
I had no idea it was that way. I just thought they just released it in a bubble of air or something, and that's what propelled it. That's fascinating. Wow.
Sure. So
Next level. Thank
these
you.
things were very classified, and now, okay, so once the Ohio class thing happened, I understood why these things might have remained classified for a long time, or why these technologies didn't come out of here and evolve into civilian life and the things that we wanted to do. So with the hydrogen stuff, that was a problem that we had in 2008 in Verizon with $140 barrel oil. We had tremendous power infrastructure with 5 and 3 megawatt generators, 60,000 diesel tanks at our data centers, Cap 5, Fios, and Temple Terrace. We had a lot of uninterruptible power supplies, all kind of diesel generation and all of this. And it was a problem that started then. So later, I was going across business silos, and I saw the energy problem. This is over in 2013, 2014. I was looking at energy problems that were leading to flat sales. So what happens is when you can't sell product, the sales are flat. You look at your business and you look at what's wrong with it to see how you can evolve it so that you can preserve jobs, so that you can maintain to Wall Street and the Fortune 50, so you can do these kind of things. And I had already been working with a Fleet Lab, Richard Winters, and those guys. And I was sitting in Temple Terrace. I looked up and I saw the sunlight, and I said, shouldn't there be solar panels on the roof? So that became the first solar panel project in Verizon around 2010, 2011. Jim Gowan came on board. The senior VPs of Verizon, they implemented that in New Jersey, and now they've undertaken a major undertaking in that company over time as leadership has changed to go in that direction. So my problem was I saw that we had energy problems and water problems. And then we had a situation in August 2013 in Sacramento where these guys with long rifles came up and shot the substation, and they darkened AT&T and Verizon networking in the Silicon Valley went dark. So I saw that. And then I saw other things going on that started, like the droughts out west in California. I saw these problems with the water that brought Lake Mead to where it is now, which is 1/3 full, running at 800 megawatts, which is a 2.8 gigawatt facility that's not being used. That's one of the most beautiful places. I had the fortune of, in the 1980s when it was full, driving out there from Las Vegas and seeing it full and getting to look at it in that period of time. Plus, I spent a lot of time in California. I've been to where you are a couple times, and I knew about all the farming and the 35% farming, and then I saw these catastrophes and the things in the Midwest and all this stuff. So what happened was, I'm thinking about these things, I'm looking into them from the business perspective, and then I see that our end customers, part of the problem was the end customer had energy and water problems, and this was affecting the Internet of Things and the AI and the data center. So the Internet of Things, as you create these technologies, it goes to the edge of the cloud and the consumer, and they get to use this technology. That's all about this. We had problems where we could not light the lasers between the cell sites for LTE 4G. And once I saw these problems, I began to think about, okay, wait a minute, we have an evolution problem here. We have these energy problems, and my electric bill and water bill isn't getting any cheaper. How can we address this? So literally, I'm sitting here and MH370 disappears into the ocean. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, why don't we just send some nuclear submarines over and go find that puppy, like our nuclear submarines. And it turns out they have limitations that can't go down to the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Then we have some of these submarines that go to Marianas Trench, but they're just designed really as research submarines. And I saw the problem with humanity. I had a download, and for the life of me, this download played. It's not a download like a vision. It was a download like none other I've ever had before in my life. It was like a movie. All of those things I just described to you played through my head like a movie. And by the way, I'd been studying Stanley Meyer's work from the Reagan Star Wars team, his 21 patents, the Book of Job, and all that, trying to understand it for a long time since the 2008 situation. That all played through my head. The Ohio class stuff, everything. The Book of Job or Jobs, which is the oldest book in the Bible. Okay. A lot of people don't understand this. That all went through my head. And then the part of the passage of Job 38, which is quoted by Stan Myers in his memoirs, in the thing, all went through my head. And I was like, what? So my friend, his wife works at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, working on the Mars rover stuff, landers, and we've landed them in Mars, and we've done all this other stuff. I figured to myself, wait a minute, what is going on here? We're doing all these things in space. We have aspirations for space, yet we have not mastered the oceans. We have mastered maybe 5% of the oceans. And I began to look at that problem. I looked at it. I looked at all the things that went through my head. And I was thinking about all these things. And that is when I came up with the equation, and things started coming apparent to me that led to the 5 patents. So the things
so you're moving to an energy source. Is that where you're and a water
so
creation source?
What happened? One was I realized that humanity had only in our backyard, we had only mastered about 5% of the oceans. I started looking at that. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? The planet's covered by 70% water. What is going on? This isn't right. Okay. Then once I saw these things, I realized that humanity had not created the technology to leverage the oceans Remember, I grew up on the docks, so I've been on super tankers. I've been on Exxon barges pumping 93 octane in the lightning storm, which is illegal. I've been on ammonia tankers. I've been on phosphate tankers, chemical tankers. I've been on a Russian 16-story ammonia tanker with an elevator. I've been on every kind of vessel you could imagine. Tugs. I've been on George Steinbrenner's tugs, Maritrans tugs, all of them. So I'm thinking about these things and I'm like, wait a minute. Either we have these other technologies or there's a lot of room for us to evolve these technologies. But also, if there's a problem here, that means that the Navy or the NATO sailors, when they come out of the military, they have limited options for employment. And this problem then carried over to a 2011 Congressional Budget Office analysis of the Navy fleet involving hydrocarbon fueling and a Navy research laboratory investigation trying to move from hydrocarbon fuels to Fischer-Tropsch based fuels on the back of the Nimitz with a test model plane on the Nimitz. This problem is a major problem with the U.S. Navy fleets. So I come with the equation. We file a provisional patent. We meet with JUs of Spa War. Okay.
Nice.
In 2017. President Trump is now president. So we meet with them.
Good timing. You're still alive, so
I'm still alive. Well, I meet with them and we start talking. Okay, we filed the patent. So with the equation, defining the system, that was the first patent that we filed. So we file it, and then I go meet with them. We talk about it, and what we were talking about was the Arleigh Burke destroyer, specifically the one in Yemen in 2000 that was bombed, was in port refueling. And that particular platform has 4 GELM 2500 turbines in it. 2 that are run all the time and 2 that are in standby. Yep. Okay. Those turbines, like many of the GE turbines in the power plants, in the aircraft, they are all through NATO and our military, except for the Zumwalt, which has a Rolls-Royce turbine in it. And GE has already written the software to handle hydrogen hybrid fuels. Okay.
Wow.
So the idea was with Jay was like, look, we know about this problem in NRL. We filed these patents with this equation, and this is going on. Well, I do understand the urgency of the F-35 strike fighter program. President Trump took JUs and moved him to the Pentagon to work on the F-35 project. And we lost Jay, and he had to focus on what the president asked him to do. And I understand why that happened and why that was a priority, because we needed that weapon platform and it was urgent. So I understand it. Since then, we've had problems, but part of that resulted in what we like to think of as the mobile platform with the de-weaponized submarine. The cost of submarine is three to four times more than a non-weaponized platform, because it needs to be run very quietly. Anything you put in there needs to be very quiet. A non-militarized or non-armed system doesn't need to be that. So the idea there was, the proposal by the Navy Research Laboratory was to decarbonize water and then run Fischer-Tropsch on the back of the Nimitz in order to fuel the aircraft and the amphibious vehicles that are on there and the helicopters. So that failed because there's not enough carbonate in the ocean. That was the problem. And I was like, you don't need to do that. You use the submarine and you use that and you pull hydrogen and oxygen out. You then transition. You can then do Fischer-Tropsch with that technology, but you need to grow a lot of seaweed. That was part of it. You need to grow a seaweed underneath the ocean to do it, to have enough plant material and carbon to do the Fischer-Tropsch. And to be honest with you, the Germans used Fischer-Tropsch and they had these mill cows, and it wasn't a good idea. With these submarines, you can keep them deep under the water. You can't see them and bomb them. You can fuel not just the Arleigh Burke destroyers. You can load tanks in the Nimitz nuclear platforms, but these other ships like the smaller PT boats and other things, they're running the GELM 1500s. And you transition this by creating hybridization, and then you move to the hydrogen platforms, because we couldn't afford the other part of that Congressional Budget Office study was running nuclear power. We couldn't afford it, and it was going to cost us a huge amount of money in disposal.
So the hydrogen, it's almost like they don't want to go that direction too. David Schmidt, who does the LifeWave stuff, he worked in the submarines, and he gave them some hydrogen stuff, and they're like, "No, you go work with the SEALs. We don't want you to change our stuff." So he's built. I've seen his technology. I can't disclose it, but he's built drones that can fly all the way around the world, drop something off, and fly back on one fuel, and that fuel is along the same lines that you're talking about. And he's going to come out with a home system that will fuel and power a home from that technology. And it sounds like you're in that same same camp.
We'd love to talk to him. We're more of industrial, so I've also built a lot of hydrogen fuel cells.
If you want to talk to him, I can arrange that. That'd be awesome.
Let's have a sidebar for sure, and definitely. So I built the hydrogen fuel cells. I've hacked up cars. I've hacked up generators. Back in 2008, what happened here was I realized the problem with MH370 was gravity, because the gravity is what holds the water to the planet, and the pressure from that is what can crush a submarine. That pressure was what created the RO water. So the gravity piece that I saw there, I didn't realize it the first time, because in the beginning of this, I was like, oh, we can use the SMR reactor like the submarine to do a lot of mobile work. But we can use that in a power plant, a physical plant, to generate a huge amount of hydrogen. And then with the equation AI, because we use AI quite a bit, AI brought to us that the gravitational pressure that holds the water to the earth is a power source. Okay. Force equals mass times acceleration, or mass times gravity. It does work. So what happens is with RO, the pressure in our system and all the patents that we have can drive turbines. Instead of crushing the submarine, it's driving turbines. We're recovering from that force. Okay. Instead of doing RO, we're driving the PIMs with that. We're using the pressure to create the RO water, and now you don't even need a nuclear reactor. But tied to Dave Sereda and the other things that we're talking about here in current times, what is going on and what has been going on, this planet is a hydrogen world. The sun is a hydrogen fusion star. So without the sun, you don't have any life here. The sun is a hydrogen fusion star. So the key trigger there is hydrogen. It was the first element after the Big Bang. The first matter was a hydrogen proton. The first element was a hydrogen atom. That was 380,000 years after the Big Bang. But it's a hydrogen energy source. And so it harmonically resonates with Earth. In other words, the radiation that we see in sunlight, that is an observable that the plants use and humans as an energy transfer. But all 15 dimensions, known and unknown by humans, is transferred from there to Earth. So that piece, I didn't fully understand these things. Jeff Rentz and Frank Chili, when I first started talking to people, they asked me to go look at the Frank Drake equation. So Frank Drake is a famous person. 1963 came up with a Frank Drake equation for habitable planets and worlds. And part of it is a planet that is a certain distance from a fusion star like the sun. So that's in scope. Now on Earth, the other pieces from that learning experience with those guys was Earth has the hydrogen oxide occupying 70%. So it's like a giant solar panel that is absorbing radiation from the sun all the time and forming the atmosphere and feeding the weather systems of it per job 38 that create the vortexes, the rain, and the lightning per job 38. Remember, there was a craft in the whirlwind, and the craft in the whirlwind was talking about what I'm telling you now. This played through my head at MH370. All of these things. So that happens. The other thing that I'm looking at is gravity is holding that to the Earth. So if you don't have gravity, okay, part of the Drake equation, one of the parameters is gravity. The gravity has to hold that water here, otherwise it evaporates. And if it evaporates, and NASA's seen this, or videos from satellites and NASA, and we know what happened with Mars supposedly lost its atmosphere. Well, you cannot sustain life on this planet unless you have that system. It's a hydrogen oxide system, and the energy is resonating with the sun. So now you've got that system. If you look at Genesis, the beginning of the Bible and the whole thing, the story and what it is. First, you have the creation of the plants. Okay. Those are DNA coded digital. There are 400,000 plants on the planet. Now, they don't serendipitously exist. They are engineered. And if we look at the DNA codes of those plants, no human can create a plant. None. Okay? None. No human can create a plant. So here's the garlic bulb. This is something we could talk about later. There's a garlic bulb. It is a DNA coded plant, like all of those 400,000 plants. Well, guess what? That code was written to run and exist and execute as a plant, engineered and designed beyond the probability of absurdity in a hydrogen world where the hydrogen star is radiating to the photosynthesis reactions of this plant and feeding it hydrogen and the nutrients and its ecological environment on the atmosphere in the weather environment per Job 38. And in that whole thing with Job 38, which Stan Myers was focusing and the Star Wars team had their thing, but he was focusing on the internal combustion engine problem with the 1970 embargo, specifically focusing on that and service chain problems with trucking and going to war and having a strategic petroleum reserve and fighting that for 30 days and other things with 21 patents that expired. That came into scope. And once I saw the gravity piece was critical, okay, what I didn't realize and Stan missed with MH370 was the gravity component. It's not in any of his memoirs at all. It's not any of his stuff. And now what it turns out, I understand his memoirs. And Dr. Randy Mills, who came into scope and work with Brilliant Light Power afterward, who's done a lot of hydrogen work with hydrino orbitals and electrons, it turns out that what Myers saw was half of it. What Mills sees is another third of it. It turns out that the passage in Job 38, what it teaches us, what Myers teaches us, what Mills teaches us. A hydrogen atom is never at equilibrium. A hydrogen atom and the electron, which is 1/1840th mass of the proton, is negatively charged. The proton is positively charged. The electron, which is in an orbital, okay, that we once said we could not calculate the velocity and position, okay, that maintains its movement because energy and this is Stan Myers and the Star Wars team, what I'm telling you now, energy comes from the fifth dimension across the gluons, particles of the hydrogen atom, and transfers it to maintain that 1s orbital of the electron, because if not, it would lose its momentum and opposites attract, positive and negative, and the electron will come and bind to the proton, just like when an ice skater loses momentum, right? Things opposites attract, so momentum stops. That doesn't occur. And so that was recognized by Dr. Randy Mills, and Dr. Randy Mills came up with the hydrino states. It turns out that electron can occupy 138 different orbitals, okay, with different energy levels, depending on how the other dimensions transfer energy in and operate on it, okay? And now we're in an area of human understanding, the limits of quantum mechanics, the limits of classical physics. So in quantum mechanics, the only wave function that we can solve for an element on the periodic table is hydrogen. Once we go past hydrogen, we cannot solve the wave function, and we cannot do energy calculations because of limitations in human math. And that now is a problem. So anybody that goes through any PhD programs or understands all that, understands eigenvalue calculus, differential equations, and all these things, you can't solve it. That's a problem with humanity. Well, look at that big periodic table. Everything starts from hydrogen. Everything is created from the element hydrogen. Everything is related to hydrogen physics-wise, evolves from there, is tied to stars like the sun. When they age and they blow up, all those other elements form. When they go dark, become a dark star, or a supernova explosion, or you get a collision of two stars and you get heavy elements produced like element 115, Bob Lazar, and all that. So the problem there is, once you recognize these things, and this is in the preface of Dr. Randy Mills' book, The Grand Unification of Physics, you realize that visionaries like Einstein and these other guys, they never had the computers that we're using to talk right now. They didn't have these. They wrote these equations from the observable things, and also they had metaphysical capability in their brain to close our eyes and simulate. That's how Einstein came with the equations that he did that stuck even till now. But those things are for dimensions that you and I live in, that are practical. The majority of science, technology, and engineering and mathematics in K through 12, undergraduate and graduate, are teaching the fundamental principles of what we do in the boundaries of the three dimensions of X, Y, and Z, and time, which is human. We're not taught right, okay? We're not taught right. And when we go outside the box and we go into these areas, we lead into the quackery or the name labeling or the deep state, which may be having programs in this, classifying it or, pulling you into it. This is the problem with humanity. So to overcome those things, you kind of got to go outside the box. And with me, I mentioned that I learned from some of these people and what they were doing with, Einstein coming up with relativity while he was dreaming. I learned some of those things, and then I had these experiences for whatever reason with the downloads and other things. So when I saw those problems in MH370 and the gravity, I realized that the operator, because you have a mass and it's that electron that's spinning around the orbital, I realized it was levitating, and that levitation was anti-gravity. So it turns out it's matter, so it's gravitationally attracted, but it's gravitationally repelled to stay in that orbital. And so the atomic forces, right, are strong and weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. So the other hidden component of the hydrogen atom was gravity and anti-gravity. And once you see that, and you see it going not only from the hydrogen atom into the other elements, up into Jaco and the metamaterials, there is a relationship in the equations, or the matter, or you see it at the atomic level with the particles. Once you see those things, you then see natural operators in the path to using synthetic methods. So the synthetic methods led to these 5 patents, was a part of it. Okay. The relationships are there mathematically, but that chemical equation that I like to always put up, that is a stoichiometric equation. It's balanced. Okay. So what the problem that we have, me and my partner, we beat each other up like crazy over the buoyancy calculations from Archimedes, which are flawed. We beat ourselves up over that. And now I realize that because we don't have a human limitation of 2 variables, we had severe problems, but we have problems now related to technology tied to that Job 38 NMH 370 experience, that where we can't do the math. Okay. So
now at some point, did you start to go multidimensional so that then it starts to work? Because when I talked to David Sereda, he's talking about and I asked him, because he's saying that we can see the stars and then we can't see the stars. We can see the planet and then we can't see the planet. And I was like, well, is it moving in and out of dimensions? And he's like, yes. So is that, once you get to that equation, does that help?
So I mentioned I studied Stan Myers and his work and the Reagan Star Wars team stuff, and trying to get a handle on it because it wasn't in the textbooks and I wasn't seeing it in papers.
Wow. Yeah.
So then comes Aisha Dean, who lives down in Sarasota. Okay. There are these things called the CDT plates. They are 12 plates that are supposed to be over 250,000 years old that contain information. She has spent a good part of her life translating these plates metaphysically, and I see her drawing this stuff up. She's like, I don't know what it is. I'm told what it is, and she starts drawing it. And I see her stuff, and then I see the particle physics stuff that Stan Myers was drawing up related to this energy transfer from the other dimensions. Okay. And then I see the chakras, the 12 chakras, and the metaphysical discussion, and the piece that is non-human. I see all these things, okay, related to this thing that went through my head in the download. And that is when I began to understand, well, what we were doing, as I was going to mention, was because we have this problem with human math and the variables, what we do is we use simulation. So we create a system, and then we do what's called perturbate it, which means we create a system, we watch how it's running, then we make a change to it, and we watch how that change occurs and whether things stabilize or not. That's called perturbation. That's physical chemistry. That's what we do. So what AI brings us in the deep state, in particular with its supercomputers and utility computing or quantum computing, what it brings us is the ability to run simulations and test changes to the simulations and do that virtually like Einstein did, and then go do it in the lab in real world. This is where we are now. But the metaphysical component of what I speak about with Aisha Dean, and I saw with that, I came to the realization that equals MC squared, the Einstein equation, the old one, the MC squared piece is for our boundaries that we are practically in and taught in. It's a boundary condition with matter, X, Y, and Z in human time. The equation, that equation goes over, because the E goes over to an equation, and I have all these, I could show them to you, but I don't want to bore people. E psi equals H psi. And E psi is the energy equation. On the left side, psi is the wave function, and the right side is the Hamiltonian operator, and psi again with a wave function. Well, E psi represents time-independent equation. There's no time. So when I look at E psi and I look at the Big Bang, and before the Big Bang and before matter formed with a proton, all dimensions of reality were in existence. All of them. Human known and human unknown. This is where we're now getting into what Dave Serrato was talking about and the truth about the rest of these things. Once you see them, you can now be respectful for them, and you can recognize them intuitively in different ways.
Right.
You actually do this. You have done this. You've talked about doing this. You've done it in the battlefield and other positions. You've done it with the universe. We all have the ability to do this. Everybody has different skill sets, and consciously we have the ability to do it. So E psi and H psi, E psi then equals those 12 chakras, which represent metaphysically the other dimensions of the 15 dimensions that I believe there are 15 that we don't humanly understand and can't process as human beings. So I told you, I said in the beginning, there were the DNA plants. No human can create a DNA plant. Those are engineered information wise gifts. Those are gifts. All of them are gifts. It turns out all the elements are also gifts. So the whole periodic table is the reason you got a plant. Mainly organic, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen. So then, okay, once you see these things and you say E psi equal to 12 chakras, you realize that when I look at it, the mathematics and the explanation isn't there. You have to have some imagination. This is where Einstein said that imagination was more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited, and limited by textbooks, limited by your mentors and your teachers. Imagination, closing your eyes, meditating, or relaxing, is what allows you to then metaphysically interact with the universe. Okay. In your case, you did that with the enemy in the battlefield and what you were focusing on. Remote viewers do it in remote viewing. I did it with science. That's what I did. Everybody does it with different things. Dave is more physics and astrology and astrophysics, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him because he uses the plants as a antenna and a transmitter. And so that plant stuff I was telling you about, we do not understand the conscious being of a plant. A plant has DNA code that gives rise to conscious being. Without plants, we don't have any animals, but these things are conscious. So when we look at Victor Schauberger, which is another thing Jeff Rentz and Frank Chile made me go after, we look at these plants at different altitudes, and the plants where you are now at that high altitude, you'll notice that they're very slim and tall and they're not broad. But the plants at sea level, like over here, like oak trees, they're stubby and broad. It turns out that their codes are designed to run like that because they are harmonically receiving energy and transmitting it to and from the sun and other things. We don't fully understand. Dave has tapped into that. And how Dave has tapped into that is with 4 watts of power in his computer system and signaling that he was sending to and from 3i Atlas, and the calculations that he made based on the trajectories and what he learned from that. And that is incredible. I think it's genius. Okay. But Victor Schauberger and that stuff saw that the code, part of that has to do with gravity. Part of it has to do with harmonic radiation in the 15 dimensions, not just the photosynthesis and the atmosphere. So that code is impacted by it. And the big thing with Genesis 1 is we do not know the source of the DNA code that created all these plants. What we do know is there are no animals without that DNA code. No human can write it. And I have all these probabilities even cited in patents. We don't know the root of the code, and we can't design the code, not for a plant. Okay. And the significance of this is in Genesis 2, you have these parables. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay, is what got humanity in trouble. Well, in Genesis 2, there's a tree of life. And the tree of life is also a DNA coded entity which yields food every month for 12 months. I had a big argument with ChatGPT over this before I had access to Grok. We argued, and then I was told it was spiritual, and I told it, no, it's a DNA coded thing. And because humans cannot write the code, and because the engineers of the code took it away from us, and because it took me a long time to figure this out, look at the book. That's the beginning of the book. You have all these trials and tribulations in the book, even all these other things in the Bible. At the very end of the Bible, in Revelations 22, after all that happens, it says, the engineers of the tree of life return it to humanity. They return to Revelations 22. And now we have that technology, okay? And I look at modern times. What are we talking about? SNAP benefits expiring, people eating food, technology, and the ability of humanity to sustain their population without dividing or animosity and evolving. So this lesson to me, okay, of these things that I've talked to you about that led me to the hydrogen, all the way from Verizon. One, I realize we're not farming right. The two-dimensional farming that we're doing, it doesn't sustain 9 billion people with cheap food. That's a problem. So downstream, those photosynthesis reactions and the way we do it, those Tesla robots and the robots that we've been building GM and Fords with and Tesla and all that, we need those things to grow our food 24/7 by 365 in facilities that are powered, that run 24/7, 365, that aren't contaminated with things that harm them, that aren't exposed to catastrophes. And then the part that comes after that in Genesis 1 is animals. So animal code, DNA code like ours gives rise to a conscious being that we can relate to. But the other animals have conscious being by way of their code. The code gives rise to the conscious being. That code then gives rise to our metaphysical ability to quantum entangle with the universe around us and other things metaphysically in that equation, E psi equal to 12 chakras. So these things are all related. The conscious being and our ability that you've used and I've used and everybody's used, these things, because we're human, because we didn't create them, we have limited ability to articulate them mathematically and to leverage them technologically to solve the problems of the modern world. And this is where we are, that we have to graduate from in order to spiritually go beyond. Because the spiritual piece where you go beyond this is, I solve the energy problem. I solve the water problem. I believe hydrogen is part of that because of the hydrogen world we talked about. I can then feed that downstream into 100% efficient photosynthesis reactions to create food. That was discovered and proved at UC Berkeley. Photosynthesis is 100% energy efficient. So when a photon of light comes from the sun and it goes through those photosynthesis reactions, it never loses any energy to heat. It's transferred directly to making glucose and starch. Animals feed on that. So in these structures, which I said they were pyramids or mountains, you can have the animals living underneath and inside them. And there goes the AOC flatulation, or I need to, Bill Gates genetically recombinate on cow farm. All that goes out the window, but so also goes out the window the illegal immigrants that bring tuberculosis in, that contaminate the lettuce and all these things. So how that came to be with the MH370 event, as these things flowed through my head, one of the things that flowed through my head, we just saw Melissa hit Jamaica. Cat 5 storm destroyed that place. I didn't postulate it from there. I postulated it from the mountains of Hispaniola. Okay. The mountains of Hispaniola have been hit by thousands of hurricanes even before recorded history, and they're still standing. But every time these little shacks that are on top, they get destroyed. It's like a sandblasted, really.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought with the farming and all these things in the beginning was, okay, I'm going to take Elon Musk's boring stuff and the boring stuff that we used to make Cheyenne Mountain in the 70s and all the other things we've made underground, and I'm going to burrow that out in the Big Sur Mountains along Pacific Coast Highway 1. This is my first thought. I'm going to burrow it out, and I'm going to farm inside there. And I'm not going to worry about any of my food ever getting destroyed again. I'm going to use the Pacific Ocean to bring in the hydrogen and oxygen, and I'm going to convert to electricity, okay, and hydropower, which is all patented. This is synthetic hydropower, how it works with Lake Mead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna light LEDs,
Yep.
and I'm going to create the photons to drive the chemical reactions to drive this code. I'm going to store the water at a higher altitude, which is part of the whole gravity thing, which is part of synthetic hydropower. I'm going to let the irrigation and gravity bring it down to the plants. So that was why we went in the X Prize. That was why we tried to convince people around Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, which is these people build human firewalls around them, like they have done with Trump and RFK Jr. and other things. That holds us back. That was the point. And that's how it came to be. And then I was like, okay, we're going to do that example. And then the other thing is where you are now, those mountains in that area, some of them have snow year round. The other ones are they hold the snow very high up, and the other ones hold the snow in the winter. All of that snow and everything from Pacific Ocean needs to be brought to Lake Mead in order to fill it and not destroy the ecological environment. So when you refill it naturally like that, like it's filled now in the Colorado River, you don't destroy all the ecology of the biological entities there. You don't destroy it. So if I were to pump seawater in, it would destroy everything and it would contaminate it. The problem that I saw was we have all this nuclear power. You still don't solve the problem with Lake Mead and the potable water. That same technology, you can bring 1,000 miles in, 2,000 miles in from the Pacific Ocean. The hydrogen, which has a head pressure that it produces on its own, buoyancy, you can bring that into these facilities in Montana and Idaho and Nebraska and Illinois and farm with it and have the facilities there inland along with the power. So we have serious problems with drought in these areas. We have serious problems with the existing wells contaminated. I have my friends, they did their PhDs in analytical chemistry and atrazine, which is a herbicide used in the cornfields that they track from the wells to the river that causes cancer. It causes cancer, right? It causes the frogs to go from male to female and all these weird things. So we use technology to solve that problem. And then the thing with the grids was, and these are all covered in the patent. Some are, you can't cover them. It turns out natural gas has hydrogen in it. So what we have in the United States is we have these natural gas grids. And the natural gas grids, they power the big daddy GE turbines down like an Apollo Beach over here where Big Ben is. These are gigawatt turbines. These aren't the 35 megawatt in Arleigh Burke or Zumwalt. These are the gigawatt ones. What we do there is we leverage those pipelines and we pass hydrogen mixes in on the burn rate curve. Hydrogen is at the top. It's a noble fuel. It's a curve. We pass it in, and what Stan Meyer's already proved, we don't need to prove any of this. He already proved that with his 21 patents in the dune buggy. Natural gas has hydrogen in it. We had 6 fuel stacks up in Jersey, Hackensack, where we stripped hydrogen to run power in the data center. That's part of this. And the rest of the carbon, hydrocarbon, we put downstream to burn for heat. Okay, so now we start running our power plants off of it, and then we go to syngas. So syngas is where I take the 78% nitrogen with the 19% oxygen and the hydrogen, and I control it in these pipelines, and I send it safely where it won't combust, where it's being taken up by the huge things that already enable the grid, because I don't have time to rebuild all the transmission lines and rebuild all the drops from the transformers to your house and do all that. It's very expensive. You can't do it overnight. That's way far in the future. We're 40 years behind. All right. The other is fueling vehicles. And that's what TECO decided to do here when I talked to their C-suite. TECO was like, look, we don't care what OPEC's doing. This is in 2008. We don't care. We don't care what Ford and Chrysler's doing. We are taking our fleet. We are going to make it natural gas again, like we did way back in the 70s with the embargo. And we're going to fuel it with our people's gas grid that we acquired. And we're not going to deal with any of this anymore. And we're going to go about our business. So those pieces are there. The other piece is Fisher-Tropsch, which is older. You got a Sasol plant in Lake Charles, and we have Fisher-Tropsch plants. So around 2016, shortly after that, the Secretary of the Air Force required the Air Force to fuel all vehicles, aircraft, with half synthetic fuel. I think it was by 2016. I may be wrong. Half by 2016, and they wanted to fuel everything. So the point there is I discussed a problem with the aircraft on the Nimitz deck, or the helicopters or amphibious vehicles. The Air Force was moving in this direction. And when the Air Force started moving in this direction, they tested it. The B-52, they put syn fuel in it, and it was knocking, and it wouldn't run. And it wouldn't run because the software and the engineering of it doesn't support syn fuel. So what they had to do was they had to take half syn fuel and half dirty fuel and dirty it up a little bit in order for the B-52 to run without knocking. If you see a B-52 and they fly over the stadium during Super Bowl, they leave a carbon trail behind.
Yep.
Okay. Now, B-1 Lancer can run syn fuel. B-2 bombers, they can run syn fuel. And other modern craft can run syn fuel. So that was specifically to position us so that we could leverage the Sasol plants and the Fisher-Tropsch reactions and the ability to handle draws on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and to use synthetic technology, because as I learned in the oil plant, we had a gas chromatograph FIR system there where I analyzed all the base stocks, synthetic base stocks, from mobile to everything for regular ones. When you have
when did so you were talking earlier about how Venezuela stole the information from Verizon, and they
stole the whole company. But just so you know, with the syn fuels and all these things, when I analyze them with the instrument, these things, they show us the data and the instruments where we can't see with our eyes. They show us the instrument, and the peak is very predominant. It's a very predominant peak like that. It's a bell-shaped curve, but it's a peak. That's a syn fuel. It's very clean. When you get a natural fuel, it looks like this. It's a big, wide, bell-shaped curve. And so viscosities and lubricants or fuels that are natural have a bunch of contaminants in them. And the stuff that's synthetic, the peak looks like that, right? And peaks look like more like kind of like that bell-shaped curve for natural stuff.
So
Anyway,
were the Venezuelans trying to like take all these technologies and start to produce something like that?
back to the Venezuelan question. So I go to Verizon. I'm in Verizon. I'm looking at these problems there.
Yep.
Early on, Hugo Chavez took a $1.5 billion telecommunications company that was in Venezuela that was owned by Verizon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Citgo family didn't get any money, and I think there were 3 or 4 companies that he nationalized, right? But this was one of them. It was a $1.5 billion communication company. And what Hugo Chavez said was, he said, the Americans are spying on us through the phone company. Well, there's no surprise there. We've done that here in the United States, right? Admiral Rogers went to President Trump. Hey, by the way, did you know the guys in the physical plan and, they're spying on? Okay, so he figures that out. He took that company. Now, what I found was interesting is there are certain people and certain companies you don't just steal. So a little while later, Hugo Chavez decided that he was going to go ahead and pay those people $750 million for the company that he stole in order not to be killed.
Didn't work out so good for him.
Yeah, because the people in that business, are diversified, and half of that, was organizations that were tied to militaries and other things that I've talked about. And I found that humorous in a way, but he took that. And that was interesting. So he took that company, and then later he settled for half of it, and walked away alive. And I will tell you another thing about Hugo Chavez that I heard a little while ago. So all of these Venezuelans, they've invaded our country. They come in on trains with the bitumen down in Texas at the border.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them ended up in Colorado, where they see some apartment buildings and whatnot.
Right.
Did whatever they want. I heard secondhand that Hugo Chavez had a sit down with some families that are very powerful. I don't know the names or details. I was told that he was told how things were going to go, and he did not agree. And shortly after, he got cancer and died.
Right.
So you can take that for what it is. I got the secondhand. I don't have facts on it. It came from a Venezuelan who fled there and was in Colorado that gave us that information. I find it interesting, given the.
I guess Maduro, he's their boy. Then he's letting them do whatever they want, and that's why he's about ready to go bye too.
So I don't know. I don't know a lot since then. Maduro's in power. I noticed that he's quite a dictator. I noticed that there were elections and this other lady won, and he nullified it, and now he's taking control. And since I mentioned the Cubans were running, the Chinese have come into South America. They're all over it.
Right.
In fact, the Chinese all the way down, all the way up have built a chain of hotels where everything's in Chinese, and the Chinese stay there. They're not like the other ones that come on foot. They go by vehicle and they stay at hotels all the way to the Darien Gap and all of that. And Michael Yana's report on it.
Right.
They have really infiltrated South America, where they were going to build a second Panamanian Canal, and they wanted to take over the first one, and they've come in and done a bunch of stuff. Okay, this is where they come in with the reagents and the fentanyl and all the other drugs that they then bring into America as part of a Chinese agenda that has harmed Americans. So we see the outcome of that with Portland, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and other large cities. I was recently told that Austin, Texas is pretty bad. We see humans that are now lost souls. They're of no value. They're lost. And these drugs have done those things, and we need to protect our own. We need to protect our children. We've had children exposed to this. We've had law enforcement exposed to it. There's no value add of that drug except for a person who is severely wounded or injured and needs it immediately to stop pain. And what we're seeing now is a similar chemical biological warfare that we've seen between the opiate wars of Britain and China, and now seeing it in the United States, as well as biological weapons that came out of Wuhan and other biological weapons. So I question the Brazilian bat coronavirus is the first one ever found in the Western world with a furin receptor. So I question, where it came from.
Yeah. Wow.
This Brazilian bat coronavirus that they just found. And also I question,
Brazil is like, at war right now. Rio de Janeiro, they're like the drug gangs and so forth who are funded by Venezuela. Venezuela runs all the cartels, drug cartels, but I guess police and some military units went in and started to raid the drug cartels, and boy, it just open warfare, automatic weapons fire. 100.
I heard you talking about that the other day. This is interesting, and of course we don't get all of it because of limited news and things that are on the ground. Mm-hmm. The good news is with the Brazilian bat coronavirus. So I had long COVID, as you know, and many others know. I created this Allicin V technology because I was in a quest, because I went through like 50 years of my life with all these colds, and you know this story. I went through all these colds, and then I got COVID in the fall of 2019, long COVID, and I was suffocating to death. So I was looking at this particular DNA coded machine that's ancient, that's defective. When you mince it, it creates 4% allicin. Well, that at the time, I thought I was having bacterial infections. I thought it was like, strep throat or just, bacterial infection for bronchitis, pneumococcus, and these things, streptococcus and all these. And I was after that. I felt that 95% of reactions, of infections were bacterial. Well, folks, I then later learned about these viruses. We could run 100. And I really didn't understand these viruses until February 1st, when Dr. Henry Nyman is talking on Jeff Rentz, and I get the DNA codes 13 days later after the sequence was released, that these coronaviruses are respiratory viruses that perforate your lungs, that then let in the bacteria to cause all these other problems that give you the bronchitis, that do damage. So the good news is, this has always been my simple model. It's just simple. It's a spike protein is a trimer. It has 3 proteins are twisted together and it has a little furin cleavage site. So this is like a SARS-CoV-2. The beauty of all this is the Brazilian thing and all this. Coronavirus is a family of viruses, which means that all the families of the mother and father and all the children and all the grandchildren are in that family. Visually, they might all look alike. In GenBank, the family means all the codes are conserved, including the protein codes. So now in Wuhan, I might have gone and taken SARS from 2004 in a Hong Kong patient that mutated, that had problems. I took the furin receptor, I isolated from him because I used humans like lab rats, and I put it in a SARS-CoV-2 in the Wuhan lab, and then I put it in the vaccine. Now, that scares people. But once you take a look at all of this problem with everything, the bat coronavirus in Brazil, the common cold, and once you realize these things are all in a common family, what you learn is outside of this is sugar coated with glucose. The glucose is the camouflage on the spike protein. It's camouflage. So the immune system of the human body, the innate immune system, cannot recognize the glucose camouflage because glucose is an energy source. Okay. And glucose is needed for energy. And if we made antibodies to glucose, we would have no energy. We wouldn't be talking or moving. Antibodies would go after them. And this does happen, but it's where the immune system fails. So when the immune system tries to make antibodies to these sugar-coated spike proteins, they fail and they end up attacking the body and causing energy problems and harm. But it's called PAMP recognition in the innate immune system, and it fails. And then when it fails, the adaptive immune system fails. Well, what I saw were two publications from the Journal of Virology, one in 2009 on spike protein and one in 2008 on the envelope proteins that hold these little capsids together, that hold the RNA. This is a nano machine. It's a coronavirus is a nano machine. Inside this is carrying the code. It's a single-stranded RNA that's self-replicating. It's not a living entity. It's a nano machine. It's coded. Okay. When the envelope, that's a 2008 publication. So I saw the disulfide bridges in this, in the publication that were through gene knockout, mutated, that caused the mice that were injected, that were normal and diseased, to live when it was mutated with a single amino acid, which is near impossible. For the envelope protein, failed, and for the spike protein with a single amino acid. When I saw that, I overlaid SARS-CoV-2 on top, and there was a 100% match in both the envelope and spike protein. So was MERS and SARS and everything. It was all there. So every variant that has come out forever has had those, which means that gene knockout target was a proper target. So then I looked closer at the gene knockout target, and I noticed it was a disulfide bridge. I had a aerosol that I was using. This aerosol with the Allicin was failing. It was failing, okay, because of physics. So I then saw that. I then looked at the molecular structures in GenBank of the proteins. I looked at Allicin as a molecule, which is about 100 angstroms, and I saw the family recognition, and I moved the aerosol pump sprayer to a real gas, which is this. It's a real gas that suspends it. Now I'm able to put Allicin at the right dosage, published in the Journal of Molecules, for the bacteria that I told you about, Streptococcus, Pneumococcus, and all that causes all the pneumonia and kills people, that comes to the pathogen party with the coronavirus and kills you with pneumonia. It comes to the pathogen party. Can't get rid of the bacteria. Okay, you can try to clean it up, but it's airborne. So are the viruses. They together harm you. They work together. And now I can put this on the entire surface of the lungs in 1 millisecond. That means I can break open all of these. I can break open the spike proteins that we have the 3D structure for. I can break that open. I can break it open. And this is the novel part about the patents and the intellectual property of Allicin V. When I break it open, Okay. It doesn't matter what's on the outside. It doesn't matter if sugar's there. It doesn't matter if I have a furin receptor for ACE2 or I don't have it. It doesn't even matter if this spike protein came from a cat, a dog, a cow, a pig, or a deer. They're in the same family. Okay.
Mhm.
And the novel part of all of this is SARS-CoV-2 that was made in the lab, the antibody can now recognize this target as an epitope. It is called an antibody target. It's epitope, which means that your spleen can make a monoclonal antibody, which means that this antibody has specificity to this. And it becomes a learned thing. So I crack open feline or bovine or canine or deer coronaviruses, and my body makes monoclonal antibodies to them. And now you release SARS-CoV-2 on me, and I have immunity that is learned by my spleen, and the innate immune system will still fail. PAMP recognition will still fail. The adaptive immune system, which makes the antibodies and learns the targets, will recover. And what will then happen is you will learn immunity. Okay. So then when you use this technology 3-4 times a day, you're cracking open these pathogens that you're breathing. You're cracking them open. They're not infecting you. Now, let's say you don't use this 3 or 4 times a day. Now you're not shielding. You're not getting the cardiovascular benefits of what Allicin does for you cardiovascular or on the cell level. By the way, Allicin has a hall pass. It can go inside your cell. So as these things are being manufactured, the spike proteins, it breaks them and shuts it all down before it captures you, because Allicin is permeable to the cell and goes inside. Where you have to treat people that have been vaccinated by a transfection system, this is a vector that's a natural one, or even if it's lab made, this is a virus. The vaccines, they don't have the spike proteins. They have the mRNA that's been modified and it's been encapsulated in what's called a vector. A vector is a capsid is a vector. It's just a way of moving your code around. Okay. And this is all about codes and hacking. So now I encapsulate it in lipid nanoparticles and I carry that message inside the cell and I hijack you, as opposed to having this coronavirus that carries that message inside and I hijack you with the same virus. The code is the same. In the case of the vaccine, they've modified the code so that RNA is very sensitive and digests. So you crack one of these open with Allicin V on the lungs, that RNA will get digested immediately. Even if this thing is hollow and infects you, it's of no value. The RNA from the transfection vaccine that enters you, okay, has been modified so that it won't digest immediately. And as I mentioned, we had a discussion with Dr. Robert Malone when I met him. There's a poly A tail is a telomere on the RNA. The one that's here is natural for retrovirus. It protects that code from degrading when it springs out of here on the lungs. But naturally, the enzymes on your fingers and your lungs and all that will degrade it. The stuff that they made in the laboratory where they extended that poly A tail out 11 times keeps it from getting degraded, keeps those enzymes that are natural, that are there to protect you. They expand it out to keep it from degrading, and then they modify the nucleotides. So it's as an mRNA technology, they are using traditional molecular genetics in order to enable the biochemistry and physics to get that code inside your cell to then hijack the cell. Either way, this or the vaccine, once you hijack that cell, you've now brought in the code. So the only way to address this problem is to make sure that the small molecule that you're using can go inside the cell. So as these proteins are coming off, they are being coded. The DNA operating system, thank God, it's the same DNA operating system of the plant and the animal. all of the DNA beings on the planet that live in the hydrogen world that we discussed earlier, they all have the same DNA operating system. The DNA codes go across a bit error correction table called the codon table. And that codon table has backdoors in it put by the engineer of the DNA operating system, engineer or engineers, the creators. They, like the NSA and CIA, they put backdoors in things. They had the vision to see it. So what they did was, there are 20 amino acids that make these proteins up. They are 20 bits. The nucleotides are 4 bits. Of DNA are 4 bits. RNA is 4 bits. And then it moves through a codon table to make a 20-bit protein that are nanomachines that make us up, or it makes up the plant. Same system. That table is a bit error correction table so that those codes survive nuclear bombs like in Japan, the crappy lead in our water, walking through the desert, maybe Breaking Bad, whatever. It was designed. That back door that they put in was 2 special bits. One of them is selenocysteine. Okay, and what selenocysteine can do, and this is the work of Dr. Ethan Taylor, when these pathogenic spike proteins are being made, or any kind of pathogen, even cancer, what you want to do is you want to put a crowbar in the gears of the operating system. Okay. On a computer, I might use an antivirus. In a cell, I use the amino acid that the bit error correction table processes, that usually puts up a stop sign and says, you're done making this nanomachine, go fold it into a spike protein, take the stop sign out, and now the car goes into the ditch through the stop sign that it should stop at. What happens with selenocysteine is when you eat it, it brings it up in your blood serum, and now it brings it up into the cytosol of the cell. And when your adult cells get hijacked, okay, it slows the kinetics down of the hijack condition. And I like to equate this to boxing. I'm talking to Nino and stuff. It's like a jab. Okay, now I'm jabbing the opponent with selenocysteine, and I've slowed the kinetics down, and the stop sign is gone, and things aren't working right for this or the vaccine. They're not working right, and they don't have control. And now the allicin takes out those disulfide bridges inside the cell, and they can't fold right, and they can't excrete right and come to the surface of the cell if they're a vaccine, or these can't be made, and they can't infect you. So together, these things they work together. So we don't sell selenium. I have 6 formulas in the patents. One of the advanced formulas that we cannot, it's not a processed food reagent ingredient. There's naturally selenium in the garlic plant. So this is naturally coming to you, but it's dependent on the soil, right? And this was all proven in China and SARS and SARS-CoV-2. The selenium in the soil where the garlic is grown contributes to the capability that I explained to you. When I came upon this, I told people as a male, you can eat 200 micrograms of selenium a day. It discusses it in here. As a female, 100 micrograms, and don't overdose because it'll be bad for you. But this is what it does, and it protects you. But in here, it comes through the soil. So what I did with this, I have other products that are not on the market today. I have a product called Allicin V SE, where we put the selenium in it so that if you come to the hospital, let's say you're unconscious, or you're really bad with SARS-CoV-2, they're going to shove a respirator down your throat. Then what happens is you don't have the time to eat the oral selenium, which I recommend, Puritan's Pride absorbable selenium. By the way, Brazil nuts, of all things, Brazil nuts have 50 micrograms. Brazil nuts are very expensive, but Brazil nuts have 50 micrograms of selenium in them. So you can eat 4 Brazil nuts, or it's cheaper to eat the stuff that's produced. And Carlyle Group has a dominant controls selenium, which I find interesting. We made Allicin V for people that were extremely sick. Now you breathe it in, and that selenium is there for you on your lungs, and it's following the same path that the coronavirus follows when you breathe it in naturally, and it's engaging the enemy, which is this bioweapon, at the lungs in a millisecond. It's then engaging it in the pulmonary tract and the heart in milliseconds later, and the brain a few milliseconds later. So this particular virus, when you breathe it in, if it's lab made, it affects your sinuses and your lungs and all of that. And then it affects the pulmonary tract and heart. And then it goes to the brain. It causes a lot of prions disease damage. Kevin McCarran has studied this. He does a lot of studying in this area in Japan. And this is the same type of thing that has caused prion damage in cows. Mad cow, he was part of all of that, and it causes problems that we're observing in deer. And this is why when you go deer hunting now, you have to take your deer meat to a butcher that can test the meat to check for the prions problem. Turns out animals have these same things and they're different flavors. And so now we have a problem on planet Earth where these codes will never leave. So it's not like I've got radiation and I've got a half-life and I lose so much of it per that half-life, I lose the toxin, or I've got lead, or I've got benzene and, it's contaminated and I just clean it up. These things are self-replicating codes. So I just need one of these to infect you, and now it makes millions. And that's the danger that we have as humans on the planet with this. So
if people are going to buy the Allicin V, I got it up on the screen from the shop. What coupon would they use?
Go out to www.allicinv.com, or you can Google it. Allicin V is trademarked. For your audience and your consumers, the code is your Jaco-7, your favorite lucky number 7. Jaco-7, I will send you an extra mil of product, whatever you buy. And you can put that in our store. We have a professional shop site store. We did open up an eBay store where you have to message us these things because we don't have the coupon codes, because we had a cyber hack for over a month by our own cloud vendor and people in that cloud vendor. And anyway, we produced some redundancy, and we made that redundancy there so we could better serve our customers during these problems. So use Jaco-7, we'll send you extra mil of product. And we also at our store encourage people to share with us why they might be buying a product so that we can communicate with them regarding other things that we might know, or how to use the product in conjunction with selenium. In the case of cancer, absorbable selenium slows down the cancer process. But we have other, turns out, Allicin V, the Allicin, it was proved in Chinese clinical trials in China that they did not publish in a Western journal, that they were able to take out cancer tumors and beat Taxol in their own hospitals. They published it in a patent for injections. The problem with that is that not everyone owns an MRI machine, can take MRI imaging and inject directly into the tumors where the cancer is, and you have to know, and you have to do 20 injections a day. It's not practical. So Karmadoc, who is a MASH doctor in Austin, Texas, who is in Kosovo, she's giving Allicin V to COVID patients with cancer and finds them going into remission. She brings me a bunch of papers from research. I look at it. They're my old friends from graduate school who discovered telomerase and discovered how telomerase is a universal target of cancer. And they got the 2009 Nobel Prize, Elizabeth Blackburn, Carol Greider, and Jack Sostak. and Dr. Tisha DeLand, she's an NY Rockefeller. These are all my colleagues. She discovered telomerase was upregulation at the formation of cancer caused by pathogens like SV40, papillomavirus, and these things that inflame us. 50 cell divisions in, after the inflammation, the cells either die or they become cancer. She published that in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 1994. And I say this is karma because I had a lot of discrimination in graduate school involving innovative technology that I created for single cell biopsy in cancer that is published under Anthony Fauci and NIH that was buried. And millions of people have died from it, from not having this. And children have died, specifically children who during the growing period have cells that are growing, and it's extremely hard to identify the difference between growing cells and cancer cells where you need single cell biopsy. So I invented the PCR of the chromosome and the PCR of the telomere to do that. That upset me. But sometimes in life you find that the universe rewards you down the road. And I say this is karma. And Karma Doc, she found it. And then I found it, and I found it. Turns out the disulfide bridges that are in these spike proteins are in telomerase. It's been proven in the research. It's been proven in the clinical trials. You can take telomerase out, and it's disulfide bridges with allicin. And when you use that with selenium cocktailed, and you use that with the other things that you are doing, okay, cancer comes in stages, and sometimes you meet the threshold and nothing you do will help you recover. But if you get it early, or you can shield against it with this technology, then you can use things like fenbendazole, right, to stop the use of glucose to fuel the energy of the tumor. It also turns out allicin impacts the vascular endothelial growth factor that results in tumorigenesis and angiogenesis, which is where the blood vessels and capillaries grow to feed the tumor so that the nutrients like your glucose can then feed the tumor, which robs you of glucose, just like the spike protein and the virus and the vaccine rob you of glucose. This is why when people die of cancer, they are so skinny, because they've been robbed of energy. So those things and the other things you do can help you. We need more data in this area. We need more research. We need to understand it better. And this is a call to action for me, to researchers and other people that are in this area or people that want to study cancer. But I think we need to collect more data. I think that our government organizations like HHS and everything related to it, American Cancer Society, we need to collect more data and get a better handle on it. We need to look at these things because the Chinese have done it, and they've already published it and demonstrated it, and they're not holding back, and they're not sharing the information with us. That's a problem, okay? So I didn't mention that this glucose business and the camouflaging, okay, these pathogens, coronavirus, the vaccine, and the spike protein, not just from coronavirus, but any kind of spike protein virus, HIV, influenza, Ebola, Marburg, all these things, even Lyme disease and the spirochete, we're now learning all have spike proteins. It turns out Lyme disease also has another lipid called PAM3 cis-like that causes the Lyme effects that allicin will break. These things rob sugar from your cells and throw them in your blood. So when they do that and they lyse and throw that in your blood, there's no insulin control, which makes an average normal person an immediate diabetic. And that glucose oxidizes the inside lining of your blood vessels and your arteries and capillaries, called endothelial tissue. And that invokes a cascade clotting mechanism that's defective because there's no insulin, which is involved in clotting, and you get spaghetti clots. And this is Biochemistry 101 Stryer. They teach you the whole cascade mechanism right in the front of the book. Insulin is only excreted when the small intestine is full and the pancreas excretes it, and it is absorbed into the blood and can then handle the glucose metabolism, or is properly there for you in the blood to handle clotting. So the oxidative diseases of this glucose robbing and throwing in your blood then leads to a diabetic condition where you have damage in the pancreas and other things. And glucose is the energy for cancer. So all this inflammatory condition puts you at high risk of cancer. You have the spaghetti clots from the von Willebrand factors and the fibrin, okay, that your body makes in a cascade that's not normal because the insulin's not there and it's abnormal now, and it's from the inside out. And so also the glucose as a diabetic will cause you A1C problems, right? You get A1C, your blood test. Well, this coronavirus or the vaccine, the spike protein, all that glucose binds the hemoglobin and causes A1C problem on top of it. And now you can't handle oxygen because that hemoglobin and A1C is oxygen that you need to get your brain and your body. Okay. And so this becomes a bioweapon that does these things to you. All right. And the codes don't leave. So where I am now, over the past weekend, Dr. Hatfield was removed and fired from his position at HHS, who was appointed by President Trump, and Secretary Kennedy approved his appointment. I do not know all the details of his termination. I don't work for them. I don't know all the details. All I know is this. A few months ago in August, I called up. I saw Dr. Hatfield was there. I called up HHS and I said, hey, I think Dr. Hatfield wants to hear what I have to say. I didn't expect the man to call me back. At 4:30 in the afternoon, he called me back. I said to him, I said, Dr. Hatfield, I was very quick and I dumped a lot of information on him. I said, look, I've created this technology. I gave a presentation to the Florida Surgeon General April 14, 2022, and Dr. Kenneth Shepke. They subpoenaed my medical records. I destroyed asthma, I destroyed long COVID, and there's a deck I gave them, and I have an updated deck, and I can send it to you. And so I sent that updated deck to him, and he said that he would try to forward that on to BARDA and ARPA-H. I don't know if he had the opportunity to do that. I understand that, and my position was, out of all these people that I've reached out to, okay, Dr. Hatfield listened to me as a citizen and a colleague. He listened to me, and I know he read what I sent him. I know that he was a proponent of stopping the mRNA vaccines and working on that. I know that he was doing what the president and RFK Jr. asked, and I recently saw a presentation by Gray and himself with Nick Holscher, and I believe that these people should be reinstated, and I believe that Americans, first and foremost, need to have transparency in the medication we're using. That's not Nick Holscher. That's a different person, Harry Sisson. But I believe, that may be I believe we're having a lot of problem in these organizations with politics and things that led to a defective vaccine that didn't result in transparent information and science. The first week you go into graduate school in the field I'm in, they read you the Riot Act about being honest and transparent and how you can lose your degrees and certification levels and kicked out and never be able to do science again for lying. Okay. And they show you people that have had. Okay. So I'm with our tax dollars and science, and I don't even care if it's private. They're science, technology, engineering, math. You need transparency, and in a case where our tax dollars are involved, when we paid for the government stuff, even more so. But it's criminal when you don't tell the truth. So I don't know what has happened here. I think that people need to be reinstated. I think there are calls for him to be reinstated. I'd like him to be reinstated. I'd like to have these organizations evaluate the technology, because Dr. Latipo, he saw the presentation in the deck that I gave him and the codes and what we just discussed today and a little bit more detail about it. He recognized it as a PhD MD, blessed it. Shepke, Dr. Shepke, the deputy director of the Department of Florida, DOH, saw it and said, I think you cured asthma. Well, it turns out that my allergy specialist, who's in his 70s, I am the first and only person that has ever recovered from the allergy level that he saw, where I was allergic to my food as a result of coronavirus. I never took vaccine. I had long COVID. I'm the only person that has ever gotten off the asthma medications I got off of and not had a relapse. And his medical records were subpoenaed along with the other physicians. I can't lie about it. They had it. And I also had myocarditis in my heart, where you met Dr. Shin. Thanks to Dr. Shin's technology, I was able to detect that I had myocarditis in my heart at the time. And part of that therapy involved the antioxidants I used in my blood, like CBD and resveratrol, which EKG and ECG do not even see. Okay. And so Dr. Hatfield, in this recent discussion, he claims that there were ECG data supporting vaccine failures, but there were rodent research strokes and death in the early testing in animals. So we don't have that information. So I'm a Maha. I can't hear you. You were going to say something?
Yeah, we did a show with the heart specialist. That was great.
So I'm a Maha, Make America Healthy Again, and I believe Maha is the road to make America great again. And the problems that we're having with SNAP and the food and the hydrogen, all these things come into scope because we need the energy and water to make the food. But the other thing that we need to do is we need to reevaluate the fact that we can't write the codes for the plants. We need to look at the molecules of the 400,000 plants. Okay, I created this technology by hacking those codes to take the 4% allicin to 100%. And then I fixed the physics problem. How many other things are there? So I have this Japanese.
All right, brother. I gotta go. I got another show. So
Understood. Understood. Anyway, we have a lot more to do there. I think as humanity, we need to address these problems. And I think we need to do it transparently for ourselves. But with technology, I feel, just to sum things up, I feel that is the way that we become more united instead of divided, because united we stand. And so where we go on, we go all. And that's my perspective on it. Just to sum things up from this long discussion, I appreciate seeing you guys. Please give Tracy my best, and we miss you. You're welcome in Florida anytime. You know, you got friends over here.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll come out and visit you. Go skiing in Heavenly Valley or something like that.
Sounds good. All right,
Thanks
everyone.
for all you do.
Thanks for everything. and we'll see you guys next time.
Have a great day.
That was